Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
An illegitimate daughter from a best friend or a husband? In today's second part of the story, we'll get to the bottom of it. Enjoy the show! You are listening to the second part of the story. You can listen to the first part in the previous video or by following the link in the description under this video. Happy listening. The most important thing in divorce is what they never tell you. It's not just something that affects spouses and children, but something that affects many others. My mother-in-law and brother-in-law never liked me for some reason, so I doubt it affected them that much. There were no last-minute calls from Gwen's family cursing me for leaving her or commiserating about my fate. God knows what she told them. However, they probably had to live with it. But the rest of the people around us? Crap. Our friends were divided. Some argued with me that I should stay with Gwen, others that it sucked and that it would be better for me to leave. Some simply moved away from both of us, avoiding the drama, and were never heard from again. Entire friendship circles disintegrated, and new lines were drawn. We didn't have many friends, online or in real life, but the effects of our divorce rippled through our small community in ways we never expected. Everything sucked. More and more people I considered my friends left me, and all this before the divorce was finalized. My depression only got worse. Luckily, I still had my sister and her family to help me. There were days when I was nothing more than a robot going about my duties, but they were there. I also tried to be close to them as much as I could. I mostly spoiled my nieces. It helped keep my mind off things, gave me something to live for, and it gave Annabelle and Duncan some much-needed time to themselves. You know, this is probably one of the only good things that came out of my divorce. My sister and her husband seemed closer than ever. It seemed that such a catastrophe, which happened very close to them, spurred them on. Their marriage had been wonderful before, and now it looked almost perfect. I wanted to envy them like hell, but I couldn't. Therefore, I was content to introduce their girls to ice cream and chocolate in modest quantities, of course. At first, my wife resisted the divorce. She and her lawyer bided their time wherever they could, but in the end, she lost hope and agreed to the divorce without objection. Finally, 7 months after I discovered the unthinkable, the papers were signed. Gwen stood stone-faced and remained silent, saying nothing. Joe was there, and God knows why. He kept looking at me as I left the judge's office with my lawyer. I didn't look back, but immediately walked out. I knew that if I looked back and saw Gwen looking at me with her eyes, I would collapse on the spot. Who would have thought that it was still possible to love someone who brought you so much pain? I went back to Mr. Len's office to sign the final papers with him. I thanked him for his services, and he gave me a packet of resources and support groups for divorced and separated couples, which he provides to each of his clients. We said goodbye. Like the trucker who had helped me that first day, I now carried a couple of Mr. Len's business cards in my wallet, and that was all. I am free. I could leave my life with Gwen behind me and move on. So why did I return to the house? It was empty. The real estate agents had cleared everything out, preparing it for sale. No one has bought it yet, but so far, there have been a few interested parties. I was hoping the house would sell soon because I had bills to pay. Since I still had the keys, I went into the house to take one last look at the place I've called home for over 6.5 years. It was depressingly quiet here. Without furniture or carpets, the slightest sound echoed throughout the house, but instead, it felt like a morgue. I entered the house again through the garage and slowly walked into the living room. The hardwood floors were refinished and looked like new, and the walls were bright white with new coats of paint. The estate agents had removed all traces of us ever being here. I knew you would appear here one last time. I turned to see Gwen standing in the kitchen doorway. I was so caught up in my thoughts that I didn't hear her car pull up or the door open. She was wearing the same tight black dress and high heels she wore at the courthouse. No wonder, I myself was still in a suit and tie. Yes, well, I waved my hand at the empty space around us. I thought it wouldn't hurt to take one last look, just to make sure we haven't forgotten anything. I looked over her shoulder. Joe isn't with you? My ex-wife, shook her head. He returned to our apartment to prepare dinner. I told him that I needed to be alone. I nodded sagely, although I had no idea what was going on in her head. Whatever it was, she and Joe would have to deal with it. It's not my problem anymore. You'd think that would make me feel better. I'm surprised you're not celebrating. Gwen walked over to the sliding glass doors that open onto the patio. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Squaring my shoulders, I sighed regretfully. No, Gwen, this is wrong. True, it's not like that. This is what was supposed to happen. Gwen looked out at the neatly trimmed backyard. When we first bought this house, we admired how ideal it would be for children to play. Now we will never have children together. I'm sorry, Jack, she cried. This shouldn't have happened. Do you regret what I found out? Do you regret that it ruined our marriage and all my love and trust in you? This is what I believe, Gwen. I sighed heavily. But nothing you said made me believe that you regretted cheating on me or that you regret what you had with Joe all these years. She didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the front lawn where our children would never play. I have to go, I told her, heading towards the door. If she wants to be alone, then I won't bother her. It's time to start living again, I said to myself. I wasn't sure I knew how to do this, but what else could I do? I was almost back to the kitchen when she called me. Her steps could be heard as she moved towards me. Jack, was it really supposed to end this way? Do you really hate me that much now? This question made me freeze. I stood in the doorway, not looking at her, trying to figure out what to answer. Yes, my voice didn't waver, and no. Turning to face her again, I shrugged. Yes, this is how it ends, Gwen. This is not what you wanted and not what I wanted, but it's simply impossible for both of us to get what we want. And no, I don't hate you. I feel betrayed, Gwen. I feel like I've been stabbed in the back and in the heart at the same time. It hurts me to look at you and think about what we could have had and then remember how you treated me. It hurts to look at you now and know that I will probably never see you again. And to be honest, I have no idea how to survive tomorrow and what I will do in all the following days. But I don't hate you. I gave her a blank, tired smile. I still love you, probably because I'm an idiot. The smile faded. But if we had stayed together, Gwen, if you and Joe had convinced me to play along with you, then yes, I would hate you. I would be offended by both you and Joe, and I would hate myself even more than I already do. And all three of us would be even more unhappy. And so we are free. You are free. You still have Joe. You can handle it. Gwen closed the distance between us, sadness etched into her brow as she placed her hands on my chest. I was a fool to let her get so close. But who do you have, Jack? She cried. Gwen was crying, leaning her head against my shoulder. I hugged her. It was emotional torture for me, but it felt so good to hug her again. I hadn't touched her since the day I found out the worst, and it felt damn good to hold her in my arms. Then I started crying too because I realized that she was crying because of me. You will be left alone again, just like when I found you, she sobbed. Frowning, she lightly punched my shoulder in frustration. You hate loneliness. Maybe I'll find someone, I reasoned unconvincingly. I'm 32. I am young. Deep down, I didn't want anyone else. I needed Gwen, whom I loved and still love. I hugged her and didn't want to let go. We stood and cried together about what we had and what now will never happen. And then I did the dumbest thing I could. I went to kiss the top of her head a second time, but when I did, she raised her head to talk to me and our lips met. It was the briefest, if not awkward, contact, but the intensity of the kiss took us by surprise. Within a few heartbeats, Gwen and I looked at each other in shock. We made love. This was not just lovemaking, this was two people who once loved each other very much saying goodbye for the last time. In the afterglow, we hugged each other tightly. We didn't look at each other and didn't say anything. This was our last moment together, and neither of us wanted to end it. For my part, the future yawned before me like a huge abyss. I was scared to be without her. I still loved her very much, but in the end, everything dies. A few hours later, we silently got up at once and began to dress in what was left of our clothes. When we parted, we hugged for the last time, kissed for the last time, and left each other's lives. And this is where everything has to change for me, right? This is where I get my head out of my fifth place, go to the gym, get in shape, start my own business, make a lot of money at a job I truly love, and find a woman who appreciates what I have to offer. Maybe she's been around all this time, or maybe I'll run into her by chance in a few weeks, and the rest of my life is done. And Gwen? This is where she gets what she deserves for being a lying, cheating cheater, right? This is where her life will become miserable, and she will have to live the rest of her life knowing that she is a rotten person who ruined a good man, right? Maybe everything will work out. Will Joe leave her? Will she come crawling back, waging a campaign of seduction and apology to win me over again, and we will have children and be happy for the rest of our days? Or maybe she'll marry Joe, and I'll cuckold him. That would be a twist of fate, yes? No, because everything was wrong. Life is not a damn fantasy. After that last day, I never saw Gwen again. I never heard from her or Joe. For years, I thought about finding her but never did. I needed to move forward, I told myself, and there was no use looking back. I heard about them from time to time. It's inevitable. They got married, and I celebrated by getting drunk alone. But after a couple of years, they completely disappeared from my life. I didn't know if they still lived in the same state, let alone in the same city. And as for me? No, I didn't get up. This tragedy did not make me reconsider my life and allow me to grow as a person. I fell. I fell hard. No, my boss was not understanding, and despite the sympathy of our HR department, I was let go after 4 months due to performance issues. No, there wasn't a crowd of hot single women waiting to pick me up. Oh, there were several sympathetic friends, but that's all they were, friends and sympathy. Most of them were happily married anyway, so there was nothing wrong in that regard. For those who had not been married, I was damaged goods and a used one at that. The rest of the details are not important. Suffice it to say that for the next 14 years, I bounced from job to job and state to state. I stopped playing, stopped communicating, and deleted all my social media accounts. I used a prepaid phone and rarely went out. Dating was out of the question. I didn't trust anyone. For 14 years, all I did was work and go home, wherever I was living at the time. At home, I ate a little, read a little, watched TV, and slept. In the middle of the night, I went for long walks. I became a grumpy, sour. Life hurt me, and I wanted to hurt it back. And I did, in 1,000 petty ways. Annabelle didn't always understand where I was. I also pulled away from her. Looking at my sister, her loving, faithful husband, and beautiful children was too much for me. Every Christmas, I sent her and Duncan as big a check as I could save for their children. After a while, I didn't even know how many they had. That was all I could handle. Can you imagine this? A decade and a half of simple existence. No family, no friends. I didn't live. I just barely survived. My weight dropped to the point where my ribs were visible. My clothes were from thrift stores and secondhand shops, and I wore them until they were threadbare. I hated life, I hated living, and I hated myself. The world doesn't owe me anything, I thought, so I don't owe it anything either. Thoughts of suicide did not leave me. Perhaps my ex-wife did not want to hurt me so much, but the humiliation lasted for years. Her lies destroyed my confidence as a man and as a person. It haunted me for years, even after I put her out of my mind. Honestly, I think the only reason I didn't kill myself was that it was too much of a hassle to bother with. I didn't have enough mental energy left at the end of the day. It was as if I was dead inside, my body just wouldn't stop walking. Then, one day, without any warning and to my great relief, I finally died. I was in Maine, unemployed again, and out of goddamn milk. Every day, at least one of my meals consisted of cereal or oatmeal, cheap foods that required no effort to prepare. They were usually unsweetened, with a little fruit if I wanted to indulge, but a lifelong habit demanded milk. So, in the middle of a chilly February night, I bundled up and walked to the corner store at 3 o'clock in the morning. There was no one on the street. The wind howled fiercely around me, a sure sign of a blizzard. The overhead lanterns cast an eerie haze into the cold air, and the absence of any sound other than sharp gusts rushing past my ears reinforced the feeling that I was the only one left in an abandoned world. I liked it. I was a ghost walking the streets of a city that was cold and devoid of life. It was appropriate, given the weather. I half expected the corner store to be closed when I got there and was prepared to turn back in bitter refusal. The universe, I believed, would be cruel enough to deny me a simple couple of liters of milk. To my slight surprise, the store was open. Neon signs flashed randomly, offering beer, lottery tickets, and an ATM. The storm likely left the personnel trapped, but as long as they had milk, I didn't care. They would still have loved ones and friends when this was all over. I couldn't say the same about myself. Without thinking about anything other than getting 2 liters and going home, I opened the door and walked in. I was beaten. My legs went out from under me, and falling onto my side, I grabbed the wire magazine rack and tore it free. At first, I didn't feel any pain, but then it spread throughout my entire upper body. It became difficult to breathe. A line of fire traced its way across my thigh, but it was nothing compared to the blossoming agony in my ribs. My lungs didn't want to work properly. Inhalation was difficult, and exhalation resulted in a sickening gurgling sound coming not only from my chest but also from my throat. My mouth was filled with a rich, astringent, honey taste. I lay flat and tried to figure out what was wrong with me, then I remembered the shots. Funny thing is, I didn't remember hearing them until I was on the floor. Moving with difficulty, I ran my hand along the front of my coat where the pain was worst. My palm became sticky, hot, and red. Again, I smiled internally as I lay on the floor. Dropping my bloody hand, I closed my eyes and smiled with satisfaction. Everything is over. It's finally over. I wanted to cry with relief. I had a laminated "Do Not Resuscitate" card in my wallet, which meant my chances of survival were slim. Fine screams were heard around me, people were shouting, and there were also loud blows. Robbery, I realized belatedly. Someone was trying to rob the store when I walked in, and for some reason, they shot me. The attack was stupid and senseless, just like death, but it's normal. It will be better this way. I remembered my sister and started to worry, but then I thought that Annabelle was strong. She didn't need her loser big brother around when she had Duncan and the kids. No one else will miss me because I have no friends. I didn't think about Gwen and whether it would affect her. She disappeared from my life so long ago that I didn't remember her at all. The searing pain in my guts and chest began to expand, engulfing me in wet, violent agony. At this point, I should have panicked. The survival instincts of my brain should have kicked in, and adrenaline should have splashed over the edge as the fear of death pumped me up. But nothing happened. I was unhappy for so long that it deformed me. My sense of the moment was disappearing. My eyelids were getting heavier. This is good, I thought, because everything around seemed so bright. I floated into oblivion as if falling into a dream. The world around me turned into vague sensations and distant sounds. People talked to me, asked questions. I tried to wave them off and tell them to leave, but they didn't seem to care. Rising and falling movement, cold flashes of light, constantly ringing alarm clocks, brighter lights, warmth, more voices. My body was pushed and moved. Get off me, I remember wheezing to someone. I wanted them to stop bothering me and let me die in peace. He reacts. I heard someone scream next to me. Sir, can you tell me your name? Do you know where you are? The questions were intrusive. I again weakly tried to wave off whoever it was and let myself float on. More screaming, something about blood pressure. We are losing him. It's okay, I muttered. I almost completely passed out from the pain. Everything is fine. I lost myself many years ago. I don't think they heard me. I wondered if anyone would worry about the tombstone. My final regret was that I didn't bother to tell anyone that it was supposed to be something simple and small and located in a place where people would constantly trip over it. And then it all ended. But she always says such nonsense, someone said with a hint of despair. Well, I mean, this is Sarah, right? I already told you about her. I wanted to agree. Why I wanted to agree and who the hell Sarah was, I had no idea. And at the same time, yes, that made sense. I just didn't know why. It was as if I was in the middle of a conversation but forgot the first half of it. Anyway, the voice continued, Eddie's the bouncer. He should have thrown that poor guy out, even though he liked the guy. Not that Eddie will ever tell him that he likes him, because Eddie is so shy. It's adorable, but still, he has a job, right? And this guy's companion is still throwing up in the toilet. This part didn't make sense to me. I thought Eddie had a crush on Sarah, so that was news to me, if only I knew who Eddie was. And Sarah? I managed to open my eyes. It was another false ceiling, this time not like the one in the store. First of all, it was clean here. My brain began to register sounds other than a high-pitched chatty voice, people walking down the hallway, beeps, raspy breathing, and a woman's voice coming from some speakers. It was a place I should have known, but I couldn't find the words for it in my head. The speaker was somewhere next to me, quite close. I felt the warmth of a hand holding mine. I wanted to turn my head and say something, but my neck wouldn't give in. The tightness in my throat prevented me from doing anything other than letting out a weak sound. Gradually, I forced my eyes to move to the left so I could see at an angle. It was tiring. Who would have thought that looking around could require so much energy? Gradually, I realized that I was in a hospital room. And a clown was holding my hand. To be honest, she was a very cute clown, not the stereotypical one with the fake nose and curly wig. Under the white makeup, she looked to be about 20 or 30 years old. Multicolored spirals swirled around her rosy cheeks. The tip of her small nose was painted a bright, cheerful red to match her lips. Her hair was a cascade of vibrant purple curls that cascaded down to her shoulders. They looked too silky and smooth to be a wig. She was wearing a white lab coat, but underneath was a dress that looked like it had survived an explosion in a crayon factory. I couldn't see past the waist, but I was sure she must be wearing chunky red shoes to complete the ensemble. While I admired her appearance, she continued to chat. I lost the thread of the conversation and just looked at her. I started to lose consciousness again, my eyelids became heavy, and my whole body felt numb. But I didn't want to sleep. It felt like I had been sleeping for years. I wanted to lie there, look at her, listen, and feel her gloved hand in mine a little longer. I didn't know why there was a clown in the hospital. I couldn't remember why I was in the hospital in the first place, but I was glad she was here, whoever she was. I tried to speak again, but only a faint sound escaped due to the blockage. There was something hard in my mouth and throat. I tried to make the sound louder so she would pay attention to me and tried to squeeze her hand to let her know I was there. My fingers barely obeyed. The gesture must have been like the slightest breeze blowing through her gloves. I didn't know if she heard me or felt the slight change in pressure, but either way, she gasped in shock. Her painted lips formed the cutest O shape as she jumped to her feet and leaned toward me. Her emerald green eyes widened in surprise. She looked at me with such joy that I had not seen in anyone for many years. "You woke up. Oh God, you're awake. How long have you?" The clown paused. "Wait, let me call the nurse. Can you stay awake? Try not to fall asleep, okay?" Her other hand reached for the white piece of plastic that was hanging by the bed, and she began to pound it furiously. A ringing sound was heard somewhere in the corridor. The hand that was still on mine gently squeezed my fingers. "Everything will be fine," she reassured me with a relieved smile. "Everything will be fine. Just don't fall asleep." I would nod if I could. Instead, I blinked slowly for a long time and tried to squeeze her hand back. Her painted smile grew wider. Then people in white lab coats and nurses' coats appeared everywhere, pushing aside the clown and checking the equipment. A middle-aged man in a blue uniform peered into my face with an expression of urgency. "Sir, can you hear me? Blink twice if you can hear me." It was like trying to lift a boulder with my eyelashes, but I slowly complied with the request. This made him smile. "Fine. Now, you're probably confused. This is completely normal." His assurances would make more sense if I knew why this was completely normal. "I am Dr. Jurovsky. You are in the hospital and have been for quite some time. Your body is weakened and is not responding very well right now. Also, you have a tube down your throat to help you breathe, so don't try to talk. You simply can't. It will be unpleasant, but try to be patient and relaxed." The sullen medic shook his head as if in admiration. "You have no idea how lucky you are, believe me." They inserted tubes into me. How I didn't realize until this moment, I have no idea, but I felt something in my nose, mouth, and throat. My right arm was weighed down by even more tubes running from the inside of my elbow somewhere up behind me. I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, and my whole body didn't feel right. How could all this be considered luck? Hold on. I know you probably have a lot of questions, and we will give you the answers. Just be patient. It takes time. No matter how foggy my mind was, I wanted to ask him if he really thought that I would go somewhere. I blinked twice at him again as a sign of understanding, and he nodded sharply in response. The reality for me was less than shaky. I was conscious most of the time, but not entirely present. The medical staff asked me questions and performed some tests, but I could not keep any of what was happening in my consciousness. From time to time, I glanced towards the door to see if the clown girl would return. She didn't return, but searching for her gave me something to do. Thinking about her also helped me take my mind off things. Lying in bed, I could only think about who she was and why she was here holding my hand. We've heard of clowns visiting sick children in the hospital. Superheroes in costumes have been known to make appearances too. I was left wondering if Spider-Man or Wonder Woman would stop by next. Knowing my luck, it had to be Deadpool. But I'm hardly a child. Nurses and doctors came and went, as did my sense of time. I slept and woke up, returned to sleep and woke up. And as I recovered, my impatience grew. Memories slowly came back to me. I remembered going to the store to buy milk. I remembered falling, but I didn't remember being shot at. I didn't remember the faces of the other people in the store, but I clearly remembered lying on the floor and seeing that there were Reese's bars for sale, buy one get one free. Reese's peanut butter cups sat below the Kit Kats. A few days after I regained consciousness, the clown appeared again. At least, I thought it had been a few days. It was still hard to tell. I was sitting in a less reclined position than before when she timidly entered, and my awareness of my surroundings became a little more stable. The breathing tube had also been removed, an unpleasant process that made me glad I was unconscious when it was inserted. I couldn't speak yet, but I could move a little. "Hello," she waved timidly from the doorway, looked around the corridor behind her, then snuck inside. She was wearing the same outfit as before. The surprising thing was that she was actually wearing huge red shoes, but instead of the traditional clown pumps, they were outrageous high heels. They looked like stilts. Then I realized that she was actually much shorter than I thought, but again, every person is taller than someone who is lying down. She carefully sat down on the chair next to me and took my hand again. I had gotten a little stronger, not much, but I was able to squeeze her fingers slightly and smile weakly. It was difficult to turn my neck to keep her in focus, but I managed. "I shouldn't actually be here," she admitted, "but I wanted to come and see how you were doing." She rolled her big green eyes. I'd always been partial to big eyes. Of course, while you were in a coma, they didn't care and called it therapy. Now that you're awake, they call it getting underfoot. Nurses, right? Well, okay. She reached out with her other hand and brushed a lock of hair from my forehead. It was a strangely intimate gesture. She seemed willing to do the talking for both of us, and I let her. It was nice to listen to her voice. It was high, pleasant, and so animated. "So, I don't know if you remember, but I'm Cotton," she said, biting her lower lip. "The makeup must have been damn good because it didn't smear. Do you remember? God, I must have talked to you for hours the last couple of weeks. I have no idea what you might have actually heard. I thought that if I continued talking to you, you would hear me." Cotton giggled and shook her head from side to side in an idiotic manner. "I'm stupid, I know. I'm a better performing clown than a therapy clown, but I had to try." I swallowed, wincing as my esophagus stretched. I couldn't speak or write, but I forced my hand to twist in her grasp until my finger reached her palm. I had to know, and there was only one way to ask. With great difficulty, I wrote one letter on the fabric of her glove. The clown was confused for a moment, realizing how much effort it had cost me. She was also smart and quickly understood what I was asking. She smiled a little sadly and took my hand in hers again. Because no one else was here for you. That's how I met Cotton, or rather, that's how I met Cindy. Cotton is both her last name and her clown name. Originally, she said she was going to choose the clown name Cottontail after an American rabbit because she liked the sound of it, but she didn't actually like rabbits much. It turned out that she heard about me while visiting the children in the children's department and, out of curiosity, came to see me. She was so touched that I had no visitors that she decided to sit with me. It was a little disappointing to find out that no one came looking for my sorry fifth place, not even my sister, but it made me even more attached to Cindy. She has a big heart. It turned out there was a reason why my sister wasn't called. Nobody knew who I was. The robbers rummaged through my coat after I passed out and took my wallet. I got to the hospital with no ID, no do not resuscitate card to explain why I was alive, and no one to identify me. At best, they realized I was local, but what next? I was officially an unknown. Moreover, until I was able to communicate, I remained a mysterious patient. It was only a week after I woke up that I was able to say my name. When they asked me if I had any relatives, I replied that I did not. I had abandoned my sister and had no intention of dragging her and her current family into my messy life. However, I felt different than before. I didn't feel like the guy who closed himself off from the whole world, hating everyone and everything. It was like a distant bad dream. But if I'm not that guy anymore, then who am I? I ended up learning more about my situation through Cindy and Dr. Dorosky. They shot me 3 times, in the left leg, in the stomach, and in the right lung. I now have an artificial knee that is guaranteed to last me 80 years, and Cindy teased that I could get my deposit back on it. The second bullet tore through the diaphragm and then ricocheted into the stomach, the force of the impact also damaging part of the liver. The third bullet passed to the right of the heart, piercing a lung and damaging a bronchial tube. To complicate matters further, when I fell, I severely smashed my skull on the floor. There was no brain damage, but the concussion made it difficult to work with me. In addition, there was one more small circumstance: malnutrition. It seemed strange, but my lack of proper nutrition and sleep offended the doctor to some extent. I wondered if he suspected my less than stable mental state. In total, I endured 93 hours of surgery and was in a coma for 6 weeks. I died twice, once in the ambulance and once during surgery. It would be a few more weeks before I could leave as I required intensive physiotherapy. It's not like I had anywhere to go. I also had no insurance and couldn't pay for any of the undoubtedly expensive surgeries, therapists, and medications. It turned out that thieves had cleaned out my bank account and apartment, which meant I didn't have any valuables or anything of value. Even if the police caught the robbers, which the detective who came to see me doubted, then everything I had was most likely long gone. Using the touchpad, I conveyed my concerns to Cindy, who just smiled and shrugged. There's nothing you can do about it now. Just focus on getting better. Then she began to tell me her stories from other places of work. She wasted time sitting with me and saw no reason to stop now. Cindy was also a good storyteller. The stories themselves weren't that interesting. I was fascinated by the way she told them. The nurses tried not to let her in, but I finally gave in figuratively. I pointed out that she was the only person who had stayed by my side, and if she wanted to continue doing so, she was welcome any time. Someone muttered that she should be around the children, but since she was a volunteer and only came to me before and after scheduled visits with the children, there was no problem. Cindy helped me very much. She knew a lot about hospitals and how they worked, and she had connections with social workers. In short, we became closer, very close. She was there for me in every therapy session. As I understand it, she spent most of her free time visiting me. She was always in her clown costume, and from time to time I began to wonder what she looked like without it. As soon as I could begin to use my voice again, deeper and huskier than before, I told her about my life, about everything. We talked until late at night, and she pulled everything out of me so easily. I freely told her in confidence what I had not told anyone else and did not hide anything. I even told her how I slept with Gwen for the last time after our divorce, a stupid thing I could never bring myself to truly regret. Strangely, there was no heat behind my condemnation of Gwen and Joe. Perhaps it was because time had eased my suffering, or perhaps because I had died and come back a different person. But I could talk about it with Cindy as if it had happened to someone else, a close friend or brother. I did not move away from the torment but took a few steps back. She also wasn't shy about revealing her past to me. Cindy Cotton dropped out of school, got into trouble, ran away from home, had a miscarriage at age 18, and never found out exactly who the baby's father was. Then she cleaned herself up, got her GED, and worked her little fifth place off to survive on her own. These are her words, not mine. One of her first jobs was performing in front of children, which is how she got into clowning. But she also worked as a waitress and tended bar, and by her own admission, she was a burlesque dancer and a web model. She earned fantastic money, and it's not surprising given her figure, but still, she loved to perform clowning on the side for charity. "You don't care that I undress or that I post myself online?" she once asked me. "It scares some people. Are you doing it like a clown?" This made her laugh, and I smiled along with her. It didn't hurt me so much to smile, maybe because I was doing it more often now. No, although I probably could do it. It seems to me that it's wrong, you know? I have plenty of other suits. Cindy tilted her head to one side, her purple curls bouncing. "But that doesn't bother you?" No, my answer was honest. If you like it, do it. Life is too short, as I've learned. I like it, but a lot of guys have problems with this, or they make all sorts of stupid assumptions, Cindy said thoughtfully. Would you date a web model? Someone who takes off her clothes for other men, who gives them lap dances. Would you have a problem with that? I refrained from answering immediately, giving myself time to think first before speaking. I wouldn't have a problem with that as long as she openly talks about it. I chewed my lip, thinking it over again. I admit I don't think I can watch her give a lap dance. It would be hard, but if I trusted her and she was honest, if it was just this and, nothing more, yes. Where did my trust issues go? Maybe I have become a different person. I wondered aloud. Why are you asking? Just like that, she answered easily. I'm just thinking about why I don't have a boyfriend now. The topic was closed, and I didn't think about it anymore. Looking back, I was an idiot. I remember asking her if she would get in trouble for spending so much time with a patient. After all, there are ethical standards when therapists, doctors, and the like enter into relationships with those under their care, right? Cindy shrugged and said, I am not a licensed therapist, just a licensed clown. Finally, it was time for me to check out. I had stayed in the hospital for several months. I would still need a lot of therapy and counseling, but they couldn't keep me for too long. I had no idea where I would live. My landlord had already illegally evicted me, and now that it was done, I had no recourse. My car was towed, and I didn't have the money to pick it up from the impound lot. I'd been worried about it all week, but Cindy kept telling me she had it all figured out and not to worry. When I asked her about the upcoming bill, she smiled again and said nothing. When the big day arrived, I got the biggest shock of my life since Gwen and Joe. It was the first time I saw Cindy in normal clothes and without her clown face, but her hair was still the same brilliant purple, and her smile without the grease paint was even more beautiful. She grinned wildly as I was wheeled towards the exit. She made a graceful pirouette, showing off her slender legs, and then, giggling, made a dramatic bow. Her outfit was much more form-fitting than a clown's, a sweet dress that hugged her curves. I understood why she was so successful as an exotic dancer. Despite her beautiful calves and healthy bust, I was still attracted to those eyes. They sparkled with mischief and fun. Later, I found out that her eyes really were such an impossible color. Her hair may have been dyed, but she didn't wear any contacts to achieve that brilliant green hue. Seeing her eyes at that moment, I understood everything. I'm in love. I just don't trust myself yet. So where are you taking me? I asked as she helped me into the car. To some shelter? Oh no, nothing like that. Don't worry, you'll love it. Cindy cast a sidelong glance at me with a grin. What, you don't trust me? I pursed my lips sarcastically. I was in a good mood. My body still ached, and any work was tiring, but I felt better than I had in years. I could only assume that the last blow to the head when I fell knocked something out of it. Maybe somewhere deep inside me, there was still a dark core, but it was eclipsed by the light of a new day. I trust you. It's difficult, but I trust you. I sighed. At least I don't have to worry about my luggage getting lost along the way, I joked. We pulled into the driveway of an early 20th century house. The upstairs neighbors are nice, Cindy told me, helping me up onto the porch. I was still getting used to walking with a cane. Judy is an assistant curator at the County Historical Society, and her husband James runs a small repair shop. Their children come to visit from time to time. They are cool, and they do amazing barbecue. She led me to the door on the right and began fiddling with a bunch of keys. There's your roommate. You'll have to watch out for her. Neighbor? I asked. Yes, she snorted with annoyance. We went inside a cozy living room filled with mismatched furniture. The apartment looked lived in but clean, not the hasty cleaning people do when expecting guests, but the constant maintenance of cleanliness. There was a faint scent of incense in the air. She can be a real pain sometimes and damn impulsive. Once she knows what she wants, she goes after it. How? Bang, zoom, and away we go. Not a single thought in her little head. So bad, I was slow to understand. Oh, you won't believe what she can do sometimes. She is a real bungler, Cindy said, closing the door behind me. For example, sometimes she finds a great guy who she's only known for a couple of months and who is really unlucky, and she just brings him to her house without any warning. Well, aren't you crazy? I wasn't that slow. Wait, you mean? She came up behind me, gently wrapping her arms around my waist. I felt her put her head on my shoulder, her breasts pressed against my back. Were you serious that day when you said that what I do doesn't bother you? Yes, if that's what you like to do, then. She stepped towards me, and Cindy's face lit up with pure delight. Bang, she whispered happily, rising on her tiptoes. Zoom. I have discovered that there are no sweeter kisses than clown kisses. 5 years have passed, and things have gotten better. There was a stark contrast between Cindy and my ex-wife that I couldn't help but notice. Gwen was quiet and somewhat passive, dark and moody. She never truly left her gothic phase behind, which showed in her sense of fashion, black clothes hugging her small, slender body. Looking back, she was the one who just let things happen. However, Cindy is a real firecracker. She was short with big expressive eyes like Gwen, but while Gwen was petite and thin, Cindy was curvy and soft. Her clothes were colorful and fashionable, and she often went out of style, which amused her. Gwen let everything in life happen to her. What about Cindy? Cindy took life in her arms and laughed in its face. However, life was not ideal. Don't be fooled. Cindy and I still have problems like any other couple. My depression didn't immediately go away, but getting shot and bashed in my head seemed to help. You could say it rebooted my brain. I didn't even suffer from PTSD, well, not much anyway. A few nightmares now and then, and certain types of doorbells were anxiety-inducing, but I managed. As for Cindy, she was impulsive, and that's not even half of it. Sometimes it was amazing how her spontaneity made me grind my teeth one day and then fall in love with her again the next. I still had a mountain of medical debt hanging over my head, but thanks to Cindy's connections, a significant part of the debt evaporated. The county paid a little, charities paid more, and the rest I could send in small installments. It may never end, the bill ran into several $100,000, but there was a good chance I would die while still in debt. Cindy didn't let me get upset about it. The sky is always hanging over your head, she told me, and there's always a chance that one day something will fall on you when you least expect it or are ready for it. But that doesn't happen. It's the same with debt. It will always be there for people like us. We can't let it stop us from living. Cindy always had a lot of similar images and metaphors to support me. She also had many ways of keeping us together. We never went to bed angry. Sometimes we had to talk all night, but we always went to bed together. If one of us said to the other, "I love you," it was said sincerely and at that moment. She said it was a house rule, and one night a week was ours. It was carved in stone as far as she was concerned. At least one night a week, any night, had to be reserved for the two of us, no family or friends. She had a lot of friends who had been through difficult times themselves and understood her. My new social world was filled with people who were not living the middle-class American dream. No one owned their own home, few owned their own cars, and everyone had problems. These friends quickly became my friends, especially when they found out that I played tabletop role-playing games. I missed a couple of editions of D&D, but it wasn't long before I started playing again. Fighting hordes of orcs with a crowd of bouncers at 4 a.m. was simply unrealistic. Thanks to these friends, I was able to find a job. It didn't make as much money as Cindy's, but it helped pay our bills. I worked part-time in our neighbor's workshop, worked on the side at a local bookstore, and filled in as a bartender, waiter, and driver at several nightclubs in the area. I earned a reputation as a reliable guy who could help out in difficult times. True to my word, Cindy's camgirl work didn't bother me, and it was funny to watch from the sidelines. Besides, a little self-satisfaction couldn't help but creep into my smile. The poor souls could pay for her time, but they would never be able to have her like I did. The dancing was a little more difficult when I saw her at the club, but I put it out of my mind. She did lap dances, but nothing more. It was a pretty upscale place where things like that didn't happen, and her boss made it clear to all his employees that if it did, they'd be screwed. My mistress is a fantastic dancer. She may not be the best in the place, but she knows how to use her body. Even more impressive was the way she extorted drinks and extra tips from patrons by lying to them and teasing them as if they had a chance with her. We laughed all the way home while she counted the money, and then we made love. Hey, I said things got better for me, but I never said we were saints. I'm not a naive young man, stupid enough to allow my heart to be trampled. That's all. I started going to therapy. Cindy often came with me. Most of the therapy was group therapy at the local university since I couldn't afford a real psychiatrist, and I supplemented it by attending various community support groups. But I finally started working on my problems and depression. There were a few small discoveries along the way, but the biggest one was about my divorce and the life I led after it. The truth was that I allowed myself to become a miserable, depressed idiot because I was punishing myself. Deep down, I hated myself for breaking the heart of the woman I loved, despite her infidelity. I didn't believe that I was worthy of love or friendship. That's why I cursed myself and pulled away from the world, because I didn't deserve happiness. The human psyche is absolutely shitty sometimes. One of the components of my ongoing rehabilitation was reconnecting with my sister. There was no way I could do this. Cindy had to dial the number for me. After a hesitant "Hi, it's Jack," Annabelle lashed out at me furiously. I sat quietly, taking each shouted insult until Cindy impatiently took the phone from me. "Hello, Annabelle, this is Cindy." "Who?" "Your brother's little lover," I almost choked. "Listen, in short, your brother was shot a couple of times and he died." No nonsense. "I know he was being a jerk, but you shouldn't yell at him on the phone like that," Cindy grinned triumphantly. "What you must do is yell at him in person. Then we can both tell him what a selfish jerk he's been. So when can you come?" It was a tearful reunion. In short, after 14 years of suffering, I was finally able to overcome myself. All it took was death, a lot of counseling, even more hard work, 5 years, and a pretty young woman who sometimes wore shoes that buzzed with every step. At the ripe age of 52, I was finally enjoying life. I may not have been rich, I may die in debt, but for the first time since the divorce, I am at peace. Life, however, wanted to throw me one last indignation. It was May, and I was relaxing on the small porch at the back of our house. This was our day. Cindy and I had the day off, and we decided to just relax together. The air was still cool, but the grass was brilliantly green, and the sky a magnificent blue. The temperature was perfect for sitting in a chair on the lawn and drinking a cup of tea. I brought the latest campaign book for the game we were supposed to start next week, but I hadn't opened it yet. I took this moment to just enjoy the outdoors. I'd been there for about half an hour when Cindy came out to join me. She had worked late the night before and had just woken up. I smiled when I saw her. "Hello, honey." How did you sleep?" She made an inarticulate sound and sat down in the chair next to mine. She took my hand with one of hers and lazily stroked the back of it with her fingers. There was nothing unusual in her being silent for a moment. She always rose slowly. For a long time, we just sat and held hands while the birds chirped around us and the distant traffic horn sounded a few streets away. I had a feeling it was going to be a good day. "Jack," she finally began without looking at me, "did you talk to Annabelle last night?" "Yes, about trifles, about how the children are doing and all that." "And what else?" Cindy nodded slightly, her gorgeous curls bouncing. "I don't know if she said anything else." I exhaled, trying to think. Remembering specific things was still a little difficult for me at times, but I was pretty good when it came to my sister and her family. "No, not at all. We didn't talk for long. The neurons are finally working. Oh yeah, I forgot that she mentioned she received the results of the DNA test she took a few months ago. Recently, she's taken genealogy seriously. I don't even know what she thinks she'll find there." "I think it's more for the children," Cindy suggested quietly. "She and Duncan want to let them know where they come from." I laughed. "They are already adults." "Well, except for James, but even he is old enough to understand that he wasn't found under a cabbage leaf." "I think sometimes it's important for children to know their family history," Cindy smiled slightly. "Nothing else?" I wasn't always the fastest horse in the race, but her tone made me frown. Cindy wasn't usually evasive. "No," I muttered, trying to push her into action. My sister may have looked a little distracted the last time I spoke to her. Should she have? My girlfriend clicked her tongue in irritation, her full lips curling. "Maybe she asked me to talk to you about it today, but I was hoping she would delve a little deeper into this topic." Cindy bit her upper lip, then sighed. "Okay, listen, you talked about her being a genealogist, right? Trying to reconnect with lost family members and all that?" I didn't understand what she was getting at. "My father died at a young age, and we were never close to his family, so I can see why Annabelle might be interested in this. We also had several cousins on our mother's side that we hadn't heard from in decades. Who doesn't love riddles? After all, there are television shows dedicated to finding your roots." But Cindy spoke ominously about it. I silently gestured with my free hand to invite her to continue. A smile flickered across her lips, and she squeezed the hand she was holding, just like when she visited me in the hospital. "What if Annabelle finds out something from your past that you didn't know about?" "Something about," she took a deep breath, "Gwen." This turn of the conversation made me fidget in my seat, and I felt my jaw tighten. "Cindy, honey, I have to put all this behind me. That's what all psychotherapists say. I need to either accept the past or let it go. Over the years, I didn't do a good job of accepting the past, so I let it go. So if it turns out that Gwen is my cousin or stepsister or aunt or whatever, I'd rather not know." Cindy let out a small growl of frustration. "That may not be true, Jack. It won't be better, but then again, maybe it would be. So Annabelle found out about this 2 weeks ago. She told me about it the night before yesterday, and the two of us decided whether to tell you or not because, yes, it's about Gwen, but at the same time, it's not. Besides, we know how you feel about secrets, and none of us want you to find out about it in a roundabout way." "So bad, huh?" I took a deep breath, thinking about what to do. I really didn't want to delve into the past, especially with my ex-wife. I felt like I had made a lot of progress in the past 5 years, and even without knowing the details, I was afraid that going back to the past might lead to a setback. On the other hand, I hated secrets. Both my lover and my sister were clearly worried about what my reaction might be if I was unpleasantly surprised again. Although I still couldn't think of any news that could be as bad as when I found out about Gwen and Joe's relationship. For me, the shots and almost dying couldn't compare with that betrayal. That's how sensitive I still was about all of this. The tip of my tongue probed the inside of one cheek as I struggled with the dilemma, but in the end, I saw only one path ahead of me. I didn't want to choose it, but the pained expression on Cindy's face said it was the only option. "Well, if it turns you both on, then I'd rather listen, I guess." She bit her lower lip, nodding, and then slid off the chair and knelt in front of me. She took my other hand. Looking into her face, I saw only love and care in her beautiful eyes. "Jack, Annabelle found out you have a daughter from Gwen, and she wants to meet you." My brain stopped working. I couldn't hear what I had just heard. The weight of this new information was too much for my mind. What did I want to say? The implausibility of it all blew my mind. This is impossible. It's been 20 years since I last saw Gwen. I don't know. This can't be. Cindy squeezed my hands tightly. She sat up a little to try to calm me down. "SHH, Jack, I know it sounds. I don't know, maybe it's strange, but you told me that you had your last fling with Gwen on the same day the divorce was finalized. Couldn't lightning strike?" I didn't know what to think. Daughter. All this time, I had a daughter, and I didn't know about it. I guess, but coming up with a complete sentence was beyond my strength. I was stunned. My beautiful, relaxing day with my lively, energetic lover had just been set on fire and thrown out of a very high window. 20 years. So this girl is about 19. Gwen and I always wanted to have children when we got married. Now it seemed that we had them, and I had lost 19 years from her life. The black core of depression threatened to rise up and suffocate me again. Cindy must have seen it coming because she wrapped her arms around me and hugged me tightly. She clung to me as if not letting me drown. Why didn't Gwen tell me? She could have told me. "I don't know, baby," Cindy whispered, hugging me tightly. "I'm sorry, Annabelle, and I didn't want to sit around too long before asking you about it, but the only way to find answers is to talk to this girl." My girlfriend pulled away from the hug and knelt down, still holding my hands. Her emerald green eyes scanned my face with concern. "Would you like to see her, Jack? Do you think you can talk to her?" 12 years. What is her name? Cindy smiled again, reassured by what she perceived as a positive step. Her name is Charity. She's in Vermont, finishing her first year of college. Charity. It was one of the names Gwen and I agreed on if we ever had a daughter. Licking my lips and swallowing, I asked the only question that really mattered at that moment. My voice was quiet with regret. "When can I meet her?" Agreements were reached. Cindy took care of everything for me, setting up a date and time to meet with Charity. It wasn't until a day or two after she told me the news that I found myself pacing nervously around the living room. I hadn't talked to Charity yet. Through our intermediary, we both agreed to wait until we saw each other face to face. I still wasn't sure this was all a good idea, but I figured that regardless of my ex-wife, Charity was innocent. It would be unfair not to listen to her. Cindy apologized as the time approached. "I think, Jack, you need to figure this out for yourself." She kissed me tenderly, "But I'll be outside if you need me, okay?" 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Swallowing, I looked at the door as if there was a monster on the other side. After a few heartbeats, I forced myself to put my hand on the handle and open the door. My heart almost broke again. She looked like Gwen Taylor, a little broader in the shoulders, reminding me of Annabelle, but those wide cheeks and narrow chin, those deep brown eyes, that's all Gwen. Her hair was cut the same way, long sleek locks that fell to her lower back but with short bangs at the front. The hair was brown, not black as Gwen usually dyed it. Other than that, there was no indication that this was Gwen's daughter. It's not like my ex-wife usually wore something as simple as blue jeans and a burgundy college sweatshirt. There was one more thing that made this girl stand out, one final nail to prove that this was my child. On her thin neck hung the antique necklace that I had given Gwen that fateful day. For a few moments, we stood and looked at each other, neither of us knowing what to say or do. I wondered if she saw anything other than a tall, thin man with graying brown hair and a cane. Was I what she expected me to be? After a few more seconds, I took the first step. "Hello, are you Charity?" The young woman nodded, her smile hesitant. "Yes, Charity Eisenberger." Eisenberger is Joe's last name, although looking at you now, I wonder if it would be better to be Charity Brandt. Unable to think of anything to say in response to this, I gestured toward the sofa. She sat down, and I sat in my usual chair next to her. Once I was comfortable, I pointed the end of my cane at the small refrigerator that sat on the floor between us. "Help yourself. There's beer, soda, and water." It's easier for me to have all this on hand than to limp to the kitchen. Charity politely declined. I wanted to get down to business right away. You were Jack Brandt, right? Guilty, which means you were my father? A heavy sigh escaped me. It seems that way, from what my sister tells me. Yes, she shared all the DNA reports from the pedigree app with me. Were you looking for me? Charity shook her head in a way that brought back painful memories. God, she had her mother's mannerisms too. Not really. I was actually looking for my mother's father, she told me. She told me how he abused her and her mother, how he disappeared one day. I was a little obsessed with finding him. My friend thought that this way, we could find him. It was a little risky, but it was cheaper than hiring a private investigator. Let me guess, I interrupted softly, you found an aunt you didn't know about who was not related to your mother or your father. Closing her eyes, Charity shook her chin in recognition. At first, I didn't know what to think. I didn't know who the hell she was or how she fit into our lives. I thought it might be a mistake or a coincidence, but then the app started connecting me with other people I didn't know, and I discovered that there was a whole side of my family that was a mystery. My daughter raised her eyelids and looked boldly into my eyes. That's when the truth started to come out. I contacted Annabelle through the app, then by email, then we started calling each other, and she told me everything about you and my mom. Oh, Joe, is Joe your father? Charity snorted. On paper, yes, but in reality, he never was. He tried, he really tried, and for that, I forgive him, but I always made him feel awkward. Do you think he knew that your mom and I, you know? That last time, I thought about it a little, and I don't think he knew. He always believed that I was from him. When I told my mother all this, she broke down and begged me not to tell him. She said that this was the only secret she was hiding from him, a secret that was only fair, she said. This made me snort. Oh, how ironic, just damn ironic. I tilted my head to one side to look at her shrewdly. If Gwen got pregnant with Joe, their plan was to pass the baby off as mine. Oh, how things have turned out. Your mom told you what led to our divorce, right? Charity laughed playfully, her eyes darting around the room to avoid looking at me. Yes, although I had to put in a lot of effort to get her to do it. What she didn't tell, your sister told me. Her gaze settled on the tips of the sneakers, the tone of her voice dropped to just above a whisper, and she sounded so small and vulnerable. I didn't know that you were both married and divorced. I didn't even know about your existence. They didn't talk about you, at least not in front of me. Neither mom nor dad ever said anything to make me think she was married to anyone other than him. Now that we were talking, it was surprising how calm I had become. Your mother knew how to keep secrets, I consoled her. I gestured to her neck. Did she give you this necklace before or after you found out about me? Her long finger absent-mindedly ran along her throat, stroking the metal. She gave it to me when I was 6, although it didn't really suit me until I was 14. Since then, I have worn it almost every day. Her face frowned, and her jaw clenched into a familiar line. When I talked to her about you, she told me where it came from, my last gift to her, I reminded her. She tilted her head to one side, her frown lessening. I remember when I was little and heard her cry often, mostly at night when my father was not at home. One day, I asked her why she was crying, and she told me something like, because he is there, alone. Then I thought she just missed Dad, but now. Your mother and I loved each other very much, I reassured Charity, but what she wanted didn't work out, and that's why you left, and that's why I left. Another heavy silence filled the room. We were both lost in our own thoughts until I interrupted with my question. Did your mom tell you why she never let me know about you? Sharp laughter again. I had to pry it out of her, but yes, in short, she knew that you were trying to leave that life behind because it was causing you too much pain. She hurt you too much. I felt that if you found out about me, you would be offended by both of us. You would feel that she is pulling you back into a relationship with her that you do not want. Yes, Gwen really knew me, I said. Maybe I've been thinking about this a lot the last couple of days while I was waiting to see Charity, and her answer was something I found plausible. After your mother, I was in a very dark place for a long time. I can't say what I would have done then. I extended my hand towards her, palm up as a sign of invitation. And now I regret that she didn't tell me about you. It seems unfair to both of us that we didn't have that chance. She looked at me with so much hope in her eyes. Are you not offended by me? I had to stop myself from laughing with relief. Why would I be offended by you? I was afraid that you would hate me for abandoning your mother and you. She smiled eagerly, took my hand, and shook her head. I started until I knew the whole story. I thought that maybe you didn't want me, and that's why you left her. Now I found out that it was all because she had been playing stupid games all this time. To be fair, I wouldn't call it a game, I said. Perhaps I have softened my heart a little towards my ex. Your mother seemed to think that the best way to deal with something unpleasant was to not deal with it. She didn't want to tell me what was going on with Joe, so she didn't. I didn't want to tell Joe that he might not be your father, and she didn't. I didn't want you to know anything about me at all, so you didn't say anything. I don't think I can forgive her for this, but I can understand. I lightly squeezed my daughter's hand. But this has nothing to do with you. God, how I wish you were my father when I was a child. You seem to be much better at talking about everything than Dad. If he were here, he would tell me that it was none of his business and that I should go talk to my mother. Joe? What do you mean? Well, I guess it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. He once said that he wanted children but that he would be a terrible father. I doubt he ever gave himself that chance. A thoughtful expression appeared on her face as she considered my words. What do we do now? Should I call you Dad now? I raised both eyebrows. Perhaps this is a little hasty, but we still don't know enough about each other to feel too comfortable. It's better if you call me Jack, at least for now. Charity nodded. She looked upset, so much so that I hastened to intervene. But now that we know about each other, Charity, we can take the time to get to know each other better, if you want. Personally, I would like to. This was rewarded with a grin that looked like it could leave my own face. So, can I move in? I realized that this was a joke and laughed along with her. With this laugh, the last tension inside me burst out, and I gave her the same grin. Depends on the circumstances. Do you think about bringing boys home from time to time? She suddenly blushed, caught off guard. No, well, I mean, boys won't be a problem. Oh. So, this friend, I began, the one who gave you the DNA test kit, is not a boy, I take it? Yes, and perhaps something more than just a friend. Charity let go of my hand and pressed herself against the sofa. Is this a problem? I kept the smirk on my face to show that this was not the case. Well, I do not know. I haven't met her yet, but I would like to. If she's here with you, we could go out to dinner together. How do you like that? The way the tension drained from her face was amazing. Charity was filled with excitement that reminded me of Cindy much more than Gwen. Yes, I mean, I'll have to ask her, but she's at the motel. We were hoping that if all goes well for you today, we could find a part-time job here until school starts at the end of the summer. This way, we could all get to know each other better. I reached forward and gently took her hand again. I think this is as good a start as we can all hope for. There's really one thing I have to ask of you, Charity. About what, Jack? She winced. God, how strange it sounds from my lips. Shaking her head to clear the thoughts, she leaned forward again. What do you want from me? This time, I hesitated. I didn't know what dreams or fantasies my daughter might have about this reunion, but there were certain things I had to let her know that weren't possible. Your mother, Gwen. I don't want to know. I swallowed. Damn Gwen, after all these years, it still hurts. I don't want to know how she's doing, where she lives, or who she's with. I don't want to see her or talk to her. I don't want to know about her or about Joe. And I don't want them to know about me. I don't want them in my life, and I don't want to be in theirs. Only in yours. Charity pursed her lips, and I could see that she was considering the consequences of my request. You still love her? I loved her, and probably always will be, or rather, I will always love Gwen, with whom I lived for 8 wonderful years. Hearing about your mother now, well, it'll just be a ghost story, very sad. But you love Cindy? I love her very much, more than I ever loved your mother on her best days and on her worst days. But Gwen is an aura in my very traumatic past, Charity, and I can't keep moving away from it. If I'm reminded of how heavy that chain is. My daughter thought for a moment before nodding in the same, all too familiar manner. I may slip up from time to time, say something by accident. It's okay, Charity. That happens, just nothing direct, please. We talked for about 2 more hours until she started to get tired. It turned out that Charity and her friend Linda arrived from their college right after classes. She'll call back later in the evening to confirm dinner plans, and we'll all go out together. Cindy crept into the living room and sat where Charity was sitting, taking my hand in hers, as she often did. So, I assume everything went well? She asked carefully. Nodding, I squeezed her hand lovingly. We're planning dinner for tonight before you go to work. I heard some of what you said, Cindy said flirtatiously. I overheard a little. What did you say about loving me more than Gwen, even on my best days with her and my worst days with me? I laughed and pulled her off the couch to sit on my good knee. You know it's true. Now I know, she said carefully, leaning against me. My lover was soft, warm, and wonderful. How are you going to prove this to me? Bagels, I announced firmly. Bagels? Yeah, I told her we'd go get some bagels for lunch. I hope they have the ones with French toast. I like them very much. Cindy furrowed her brows in confusion. How will bagels prove that you love me, Jack? Just watch. Without taking my eyes off her face, I stroked her 4th finger. After bagels, we'll go to the jeweler's, and I'll buy you a ring, and I'll make you an offer, Cindy. Oh, well. It was so funny to see how embarrassed she was. She melted in my arms, squealing in surprise. Over the last year or 2, we have talked about marriage. It's time to do more than just talk. The time has come to start our own family. Well, if so. Cindy kissed me with one of her special kisses. If that's the case, she murmured, nipping at my ear, then I guess I should say yes and save you some time. Although, we should have a honeymoon with a rehearsal just to make sure we do everything right. I chuckled. The bagels could wait a little longer. The little things in life will always be there while we deal with big things. What do you think of our second half of the story? It seems to me that in this part of the story all the plot that was missing in the first part was revealed, and that's what the second part is for. What's your impression of the story? Write in the comments. See you in the comments.